I was drafted into the Exeter CRUISSE project to do some interviews with people who live with the uncertainty around flooding in Cornwall. That's the team and I'm the person on the end. And the approach comes from the politics department, as far as I can ascertain, looking at the policy around flooding. And what's just been said in the last two presentations, I think is very interesting when you get down to working at the level with people who experience floods in small places like Cornwall. So they're living with uncertainty every day. You can see the floodboards in the picture there. There's a lot of small places in Cornwall where there's flooding going on pretty much every week. And they don't want you to know about them. So they're not tweeting. They don't want me to say where they live. So I'm calling them the people of the Forgotten Village. There's a lot of sort of very steep-sided valleys going into small tidal creeks in Cornwall. They're very picturesque and lovely. When people live there, they don't really want to be bothered by visitors. So they keep it to themselves. And because the way the road network works, a lot of them can be missed by tourists who sail on past and go to the big honeypot sites. And that's very nice, and so a lot of these places are really good for wildlife and they're protected, and they also tend to be conservation areas. They have a lot of listed buildings in them, and the infrastructure is ageing fast, shall we say. So surveying members, I'm still in the middle of this, so I've done 18 so far. I had 10 weeks to do 20, and I shall hit 21 hopefully by the end of week 10. It's a 50-50 split between male and female respondents, but the age group is interesting. Obviously most of the people you interview are retired because they are the sort of people that can afford to live in a nice hidden creek in Cornwall. What I find fascinating is a huge number of them are retired engineers, which is interesting in the context of flooding. And I've interviewed a retired CEO, we've got the old marketing executive, retired teachers, middle managers and boat builders. They seem to predominate. And the hazards, there are quite a few. There are these main rivers that are squeezed between buildings. As development goes on upstream, these become more and more of a problem as people sort of concrete over everything. The rain's got to go somewhere. At the same time, the tide comes in and out a couple of times a day, and sometimes if the wind is blowing in the right direction, there's very low pressure, they get flooding, and the sort of perfect storm is when it all comes together at once. People do seem to just live with that though, and one of the greatest things I heard as well, you know, the tide goes out quite quickly, and they sort of just move up a level in the house. This is just a comment from somebody, you know, the idea in this forgotten village where it all sort of comes together, and at the same time people upstream are chucking garden rubbish and all sorts of stuff, branches, whatever in, and rubbish, and it all comes together in a really nasty moment. And there's not enough infrastructure downstream to deal with any of that. People just have to manage it on their own. So in the Forgotten Village, the main river just looks like a stream, and there's usually a couple of nice little bridges over the top, and it all looks lovely on a sunny day. But in this particular one, the water can go over the top of that bridge, and within 10 minutes of it starting to rain. A lot of people just almost have to watch it and know what's happening. But because there's a lot of engineers, they do an awful lot of things themselves to deal with that. There's a lot of hidden pumps and small moats and strange contraptions, and lots of weird piping systems all over the place. So this community, though, they expect, without doubt, they expect a Boscastle stroke cover act style event in the near future. They feel it's definitely going to happen, they just don't know when. They're working on an emergency plan. They've rebuilt their community hall 4 foot higher up because they don't want it to get flooded. And about the highest tech thing they've got in the whole village is this float switch under the hall, and if it reaches a certain height, an alarm goes off. They're used to going without electricity though, and most of their warning systems and mechanisms are visual and verbal. So someone looks over the valley, sees the water coming, shouts to someone on the other side of the valley. Someone said to me, well, you know, we know when we've got to do something because Roger runs up the road shouting. They're not tweeting, they're not even phoning each other, they are just verbally communicating. But the uncertainty they live with grows every day, so this is an attenuation dam upstream from the Forgotten Village, which was put in after a housing estate was built and immediately started flooding the village. The problem with that attenuation dam now is it's not really working as well as it was 20 years ago. And there is another planned development of 1,000 homes upstream, which would also send rainwater to this attenuation dam, which clearly isn't going to hold. So they're very worried about that in the backs of their minds, but they try not to talk about it. And they do feel very much ignored because the Environment Agency have been very explicit in saying you're all too small for us to bother to do much more for you. The cost-benefit analysis says, you know, you're not worth too much attention. So these are the uncertainties. The rain will come eventually, but we don't know when. There will be debris. There could be a lot, there could be a little. Some people will flood, some people won't. They feel they know who they are based on the heights of their floors and things like this, but they could be caught out. They don't feel that people are personally in danger. They've got a handle on things. They feel they won't suffer physically, they'll be all right, but they know that property will be damaged. And they're absolutely clear in their minds that the emergency services won't come to them because they know of other small villages where the emergency services haven't been when there are big serious events. It's where the cameras go, the emergency services all go there, they don't go here. So they talk about it amongst themselves all the time, and that talk follows the route of the main river down, quite obviously. Neighbours talk to each other. And there's two different views of what's going on. There's the views of people who are below the waterline and the views of people that are generally above are quite different, obviously. There's lots of individual attempts to limit the risk, you know, putting in extra drainage pipes, putting in the walls by the river, digging extra drainage channels, putting sumps in people's garages, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on. It's not coordinated. And usually it has a knock-on effect. So somebody upstream does something and that affects their neighbour down the road and so on. So there's a domino effect all the way down to the bottom. And they talk about this a bit. There is a village newsletter. Obviously it's not gone viral. It's just I think it's got 100 people that it goes to. And the discussion is limited because they specifically don't want to increase their insurance premiums by being considered a place that's at risk. And they also don't want their property values to go down. So it is a really interesting scenario when they are weighing up the risks themselves and deciding to handle things themselves. And part of the problem is about insurance costs. And this is what someone said to me about the emergency plan. You know, it waxes and wanes. They talk about things a lot and then not a lot happens potentially. But they've kind of come to an agreement now, but they don't want a formalised plan. They want it very low key and they just want to be able to control it themselves. But that means that if this is just one example of many, many communities in a rural area, how does this fit with people's models and understanding of the overall impact, economic costs, etc., etc. And just to say that George Eustace came to speak to the Cornwall Flood Forum last week and said, oh, economists, they're so last year, It's all about natural capital accounting now. Economists don't know anything of that. You know, in order to change their cost-benefit analysis, you have to tell them what natural ecosystem services you've got going in your area, and that will change what's happening. So he tried to make them feel better, and then he said, but of course, in this interim period where we don't know how to value anything, you're all just going to have to go without money, and so some of you will just be drowned. So there we go. That's a sort of my little input from Cornwall.